From protests to celebrations in Baltimore as criminal charges are filed against police in the death of a black man. I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the charges, the reaction, and what's next for police departments in Baltimore and around the nation.
I'm Amita Sharma. There are new details tonight about the $5 billion settlement for the San Onofre shutdown. Ratepayers are picking up most of the tab. Now Edison's giving us a look at some emails surrounding the deal.
It's real clear that most artists have a wonderful creative side, but they struggle with the business side.
And from our culture desk, helping artists navigate the business of art. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. 6 Baltimore police officers face criminal charges tonight in the death of Freddie Gray. He was a 25-year-old black man who died after suffering a critical spine injury in the back of a police wagon. The state's attorney for Baltimore announced the charges less than a day after receiving the autopsy report. She says police had no reason to stop Gray or to arrest him.
The findings of our comprehensive, thorough, and independent investigation, coupled with the medical examiner's determination that Mr. Gray's death was a homicide, which we received today, has led us to believe that we have probable cause to file criminal charges. Yes! Yes!
Baltimore's police union says the charges are a rush to judgment. Freddie Gray's death follows a spate of high-profile police brutality cases in the last year. Amita Sharma is in for Peggy Pico tonight with some perspective on the relationships between police and the communities that they're sworn to protect.
Earlier this week, President Obama called on police departments around the nation to work more closely with communities to address racial tensions.
We have seen too many instances of what appears to be police officers interacting with individuals, primarily African American, often poor, in ways that raise troubling questions.
USD sociology professor Tom Reifer joins me to discuss some of the deeper issues potentially underlying what we're witnessing across the country. First, Professor Reifer, what's your reaction to the announcement today that 6 Baltimore police officers will be charged in the death of Freddie Gray?
Well, I was surprised, and I think it's a hopeful, possible first step to address the long history of police brutality in Baltimore and other low-income communities of color.
Initially, after Freddie Gray's death, the demonstrations in Baltimore were mostly peaceful, and then suddenly violence erupted. What's your perspective on what we saw there this week?
Well, I think what you've been seeing across America is urban rebellions. We're coming up against the 50th anniversary of the Watts riots, April 29th with the anniversary of the 1992 Los Angeles riots. And when people's dreams are deferred and you have a history of police brutality and lack of incorporation into the America, then anger stokes up at a certain level, and something like this sets off a spark. So I think that we've seen it happen before, and we're probably going to see it happen again unless the issues are addressed.
Is this about police brutality? I ask because, look, there's the case of Freddie Gray, whose neck is nearly severed while in police custody. There's the case of Walter Scott, shot in the back while running away from police. There's the case of Eric Courtney Harris, shot in the back by a handgun from an officer who mistook the weapon for a taser. Many would say this is police brutality, but you talk about dreams deferred. Which is it, or is it both?
It's both. Langston Hughes in 1951 said, "What happens to a dream deferred?" And the last line is, "Or does it explode?" And I think that what you see is a history of the making of ghettos by whites in the U.S. What you see is the history of American racism and it kindles up to such a point where it explodes, and the larger issues have to be addressed, and that's structural inequality that leads to dramatic differences in life opportunities and life expectancies for African Americans versus white Americans.
Have there been places in the United States where those larger issues have been addressed successfully?
Generally speaking, in your urban areas, no. In fact, I think that the last riots that existed in Baltimore happened after the assassination of Martin Luther King. And since the assassination of Martin Luther King, I think you've seen the assassination of King's dream. King's dream was of radical redistribution and shared power. He didn't want to integrate African Americans into a burning house. And what we've seen since King's death is a massive redistribution of power away from the vast majority of Americans towards the wealthiest Americans, and those urban communities that have faced deindustrialization and disinvestment have been hit the hardest.
But we're not really hearing talk about that, about the deferred dream, about the massive inequality within the context of police brutality, are we?
No, and as Tupac Shakur said, got money for war but can't feed the poor. The Republican-dominated Congress just added $40 billion more to the military budget while making massive cuts in social programs. So it seems that while people pretend and feign concern over this issue, all the policies are going in the wrong direction. And that's something that we seriously have to address as a country. Otherwise, we're going to see more instances of police brutality and more instances of explosion in ghetto communities.
There have been concerns about police or racial profiling here in San Diego. Could a Baltimore-type situation happen here?
Yes, it's different in San Diego because actually a lot of parts of Southern California, specifically Orange County and San Diego, have largely excluded black communities, actually, versus the conditions of the ghetto that you see in places like Los Angeles. But there's been a number of studies looking at, for example, narcotic search warrants in San Diego, and it shows very clearly that the vast majority of narcotic search warrants are served against blacks and Latinos, even though the majority of times they don't actually find narcotics. They do when they search the homes of whites. So we have serious problems of racial bias and racial profiling here in San Diego.
Professor Tom Reifer, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks very much.
The Defense Department says there's been a drop in the number of sexual assaults in the military. The Pentagon's annual report also shows an increase in reports of assault. It says more than 20,000 service members reported assaults last year. The report also calls for more to be done about sexual harassment.
The survey suggests that 22% of active duty women and 7% of active duty men may have experienced some form of sexual harassment last year. That's abhorrent and has to stop, not just because it's flat out wrong, but also because the data show that those who experience sexual harassment are more likely to be sexually assaulted.
The report says more training is needed, especially for junior officers. A 5-member medical team left San Diego today to help survivors of the devastating earthquake in Nepal. More than 6,000 people were killed. Tens of thousands are injured. The Himalayan nation was rocked by a magnitude 7.8 earthquake that was centered near the capital of Kathmandu. The quake brought some buildings down and severely damaged others. The search for survivors has been constant since the trembler hit last weekend. Jan Zachary is a nurse on the 5-member Scripps team.
There's so many unknowns of how much devastation is there and what the monsoon season will do in terms of the trails and the access to getting there and the mudslides.
Zachary has been to Nepal before, and she says the people there are strong, both physically and spiritually. She says they are good at living with very little. Zachary looks forward to landing and helping, but she says she's not completely sure what it will be like when they get there.
There'll be a lot of unpredictable things. There's a lot of chaos there, but what we're anticipating is that we may spend some time in Kathmandu. We perhaps will work at some of the clinics that are already established there. And then we are probably going to be in the rural environment as well, so doing some hiking into the villages.
Those hikes could be brutal. The team will have to contend with elevation and mudslides. Scripps President Chris Van Gorder says the team will work with the International Medical Corps, which is coordinating relief efforts.
They will be there at least 14 days on the ground, and we count for 2 or 3 days travel to and from. So it's a 21-day mission, and we will start preparing a second team once we hear back from them and the International Medical Corps, and then we'll know what the next team makeup should look like. 3 other San Diego organizations are providing relief in Nepal. International relief teams already sent a shipment of medical supplies. The Rescue Task Force is helping with volunteers,
And Restore International, which runs an orphanage in Kathmandu, has started a relief fund for victims. Truck drivers serving San Diego's port are back on the job after a 4-day strike over wages. Drivers that serve the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports also walked out. Though truckers did not get any concessions from employers, they say they will be back on the picket lines again. San Diego Unified School District has made a tentative deal with its teachers union. It includes pay raises, smaller classes, and more counselors and educators. Elementary teachers would get more prep time as well. The district would also develop a new evaluation process and offer new retirement initiatives, or incentives rather. Union members still have to approve that deal. San Diego Opera released tax documents detailing its employment settlement with some of its top former executives. The filings say that more than $1 million went to former general manager Ian Campbell and his chief fundraiser and wife, Ann Spira Campbell. Ian Campbell wanted to close down the company last year because he said it wasn't financially sustainable. That decision was reversed after a public outcry. More details are coming out about how California electricity customers got saddled with most of nearly $5 billion in a bill tied to the untimely shutdown of the San Onofre nuclear power plant. Amitha Sharma has more.
The deal is called a settlement agreement, and it put an end to an inquiry into why the plant's new equipment failed. San Onofre's majority owner, Southern California Edison, said it was a good deal for ratepayers. But emails released this week show that Edison executives worked behind the scenes with state regulators on that deal. Edison declined to send a representative to talk to us about the emails. Former San Diego City Attorney Mike Aguirre, who represents ratepayers, joins me now. Mike, going back to May 2013, in one of those emails that was released, Edison executive Michael Hoover states, quote, "We have a small window of opportunity to work with parties to implement a shutdown in exchange for getting our money back." How do you view that email?
That's really one of the most interesting emails we've had, because what it suggests is what a lot of people have suspected, is that there was some deal struck where San Onofre would be shut down and the ratepayer or the shareholders would be paid for the cost of San Onofre. So that suggests that maybe there's some real validity to that theory.
We know former PUC President Michael Peavy met with an Edison executive in March 2013 in Poland, where they discussed a framework for the settlement agreement. Edison says that final settlement is very different from what was discussed in Poland. Do you agree?
No, if you look at point 1 and point 3 on the what they call the RSG notes, were the notes that were made in Warsaw, Poland, it basically says that the ratepayers are going to pay for all the costs of the plant except for a small portion of the replacement steam generators, and that they're going to also have to pay for the replacement power. Many people don't realize that when the plant shut down, they had to go out and buy replacement power, and that cost another $400 million on top of what it otherwise would have cost. And that's pretty much what the deal was. So I think it's striking how similar the two are.
Edison did not release dozens of other emails asserting legal privilege, but we have logs of those emails. And in the subject line of those unreleased emails between Commissioner Mike Florio and Edison is the word script. Multiple times in emails between former PUC President Peavy and Edison, you see in the subject line talking points. What do you think those subject lines indicate?
Well, having gone through the hearing on May the 14th in 2014, it was very clear that the session was scripted out. The administrative law judge came out and read a document which I now believe was the script that they're talking about. Each of the players carried out as if it was scripted, and it was all designed to create the facade, or the appearance, I should say, of a legitimate hearing into whether making ratepayers pay almost $5 billion for the San Onofre defunct plant was a fair thing. And so what we now see is, behind closed doors, that they had worked out these scripts and they won't turn them over, and hopefully we'll get some way to get them turned over.
Well, let's talk about the fairness issue. Edison President Pedro Pizarro said this week, quote, "The settlement is fair and reasonable, was properly and appropriately negotiated with consumer groups, and delivers substantial benefits to our customers." But You've challenged that claim in court. Why?
Well, I think that if what we all now know is out there, and most people can see what's happened, to see what the head of SCE now is articulating, that this is somehow a good deal, I mean, it really shows you just how out of touch they are. Number one, the steam generators that were deployed were souped up. They took on much greater risk than anyone was warned about, that Southern California Edison put in place. And then they failed within the first year, and now they can't produce any electricity, yet the ratepayers are going to pay between now and 2022 almost $5 billion. How is that fair? How is that a good deal? Where's the benefit for that? There's no tangible benefit. That's why this has been one of the great massive white-collar crimes in California history, where ratepayers are going to be paying $5 billion. And this is just part of the picture. Remember, the Utilities Commission imposes $50 billion of rates in a whole variety of areas, and this is the system that you're seeing here that's followed in those other cases as well.
Very quickly, Edison's email release this week also showed that crisis consultant Mark Fabiani has been hired. How do you view that hire? Well,
I think it is really interesting that Mark, this is another monopolist that, you know, he's come to represent, and I'd like to see what his game plan was. You know, he had a game plan for him. I think he should release it. I don't think he was advising them as a lawyer. They've withheld it, and I sure hope that Mark will come out and let all the San Diegans know why he was working for a company that's trying to raise rates for people here in San Diego while they're taking our team up to Los Angeles.
Mike Aguirre, thanks so much for coming on the program.
A new challenge for SeaWorld San Diego. A state safety agency is accusing the marine park of not training workers to safely interact with its killer whales. The Cal OSHA citations carry nearly $26,000 in fines. SeaWorld says the citations show a fundamental misunderstanding of what's needed to care for killer whales. The park plans to appeal. Gas prices are shooting up again, jumping 9 cents today in San Diego. It is the 15th day in a row that prices have gone up. And what's driving that push? AAA says refinery shutdowns. California gas prices are now $1 a gallon above the national average, and it could get worse. A refinery in El Segundo is going offline until July. A consumer watchdog group is calling on state lawmakers to make refineries keep more supply on hand and to publicly report any changes in production. California's population got a slight bump up last year. There was a 1% increase to nearly 39 million people. The Department of Finance says that San Diego and San Jose had the largest gains, but Los Angeles remains the state's largest city with 4 million people.
The San Diego election season starts with a game of musical chairs. The Chula Vista City Council is facing ethics and transparency issues, and Caltrans is using drinking water on freeway medians. Why? Join us for the KPBS Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
One of the world's most popular video games is now one of El Cajon's most enticing educational tools. This was Minecraft Day at Emerald Middle School in El Cajon. District officials say with Minecraft, students learn everything from math to language, and parents say that students love school more because of the game. And the game makers say it's changing the classroom dynamic.
When their kids wake up and they can't wait to come to school, and they want to come to school on Saturdays, parents are thankful.
It's the students themselves who are not only champions of the game, and they say they want to use it and they're finding cool new ways to use it, but they're also able to educate the teachers on how it can be used.
More than 100 million people, including all of my kids, play Minecraft worldwide. People with exceptional memories are gathering in San Diego this weekend. KPBS science reporter David Wagner says they're promoting brain research through competition.
I'm ready, and then I'll say go. Okay?
Local company Dart Neuroscience is conducting a test run for its second annual Extreme Memory Tournament. 24 of the world's top memory athletes will soon be here, going head-to-head in games such as memorizing a deck of shuffled cards. Most competitors commit these long sequences to memory by visualizing them in a mental space, sometimes called a memory palace. Tournament founder and USA memory champ Nelson Dellis says he turns cards into people and then places them throughout his house.
So in my case, the Queen of Hearts is always my mom, because the hearts signifies family, and queen of my family is my mom. So instead of the actual card, I actually picture my human mother, right, in my house doing something. And then the next card is 7 of diamonds. That's Gerard Depardieu, the musketeer, as a musketeer. For whatever reason, there's a reason why. But I picture him instead of the card. And I know that language very well because I've practiced.
After looking at a deck of cards for just 40 seconds, he's able to reconstruct it by walking back through his memory house. Dart scientist Mary Pick says the company hosts this event in part to further their research on people with unusually strong memories.
What we hope to do is identify these individuals and study them further to better understand if there's a link between genetics and exceptional memory abilities that might down the road lead to drug discovery and development.
The top prize in the Extreme Memory Tournament is $12,000, and anyone can be a spectator. David Wagner, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we head to Indiana, where a county is struggling with an HIV crisis and turning to needle exchange to stop the spike in infections. That's Friday on the PBS News Hour.
Patrick Stillman has been incubating the idea for the studio door for years. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando visits the new gallery and studio space that finally opened last month in North Park.
10 years ago, Patrick Stillman decided to make a serious commitment to his art.
I'm basically an acrylic painter. For me, it's all about the movement of the physical body. And so I do dancers, surfers, skateboarders. I find that that movement, there's a sensuality and an energy that's created that I try to capture in my work.
As he was developing his craft, he was also trying to figure out how to create a business that would look to the intersection of art and commerce.
There are a lot of difficult questions that arise when you want to become a professional artist. How do you relate to galleries? How do you get in? How do you price your work? And I learned quickly that by meeting and discussing things with other artists and building community, it started breaking down the barriers of understanding the mechanics of art and in the sense of business.
Stillman looked to his own personal experiences, saw what was most needed to help his fellow artists, and then created what he calls an arts incubator.
So we're at the studio door, which is in the heart of North Park. I think it's an ideal place for us to really build community, both for the artists and for San Diego.
Artist Linda Littoral is showcased at the studio door, which she says acknowledges the commercial aspects of being an artist.
Because a lot of artists like myself really don't like that part of the art world. So Patrick is helping artists to discover that path of showing your work and selling it.
It's real clear that most artists have a wonderful creative side, but they struggle with the business side. And so that's where the studio door focuses. How can we help the creative marketplace grow, both for the artist and for art lovers?
The studio door benefits from being run by an artist who understands firsthand how daunting it can be to create a work that you feel has intrinsic value and then have to learn how to place a dollar value on that in order to make a living. So the studio door focuses on two things. 1, assisting artists with art-to-market knowledge, and 2, creating opportunities that will help artists grow by providing working studio space, an online presence, and curating exhibits like the current 50 to watch.
50 artists have been selected to represent San Diego's visual arts, and they're being seen in 2 shows, an online gallery, and going out to 2,000 galleries across the country in the form of a publication that we've created.
Artist Chris Smith is one of the 50 to watch.
Feels really good. It's a great opportunity, and we're getting out there in a lot of places. Patrick is great at promoting that. This is Crawling from the Wreckage. It was inspired by old Andy Warhol clips where he used to take from newspapers, car accidents. And so then you have like the yellow for the stripes in the road, the black, the white, and then kind of how it just has that feel of wreckage.
I'm Stefan, Italian. I'm from Slovakia, living in San Diego, and I'm in Studio Door, amazing space. This is my painting, Calm After the Storm. There's a lot of emotions there. It's a piece of my life, and that's what I do, painting my feelings.
And this is my painting here. It's called Meditation 18. The painting that I do is mostly internal work. It's about meditating and finding my creative source and trying to put it on a canvas.
The visual arts scene today, especially in San Diego, covers a lot of ground. And it was important to make sure that we were kind of highlighting all the different styles that are available in San Diego.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest thing about his shows is that there's a little bit of something for everybody.
And maybe even a few things that will surprise you. But maybe the biggest surprise is the practical approach Stillman is taking to something fueled by such intangible things as creativity, imagination, and inspiration. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
And in case you're wondering, the 50 to Watch exhibit continues at the studio door through May 15th. Got a couple of weeks there. Overall, we're looking at a warm weekend with just a slight drop in temperatures predicted. No sun at the beaches, 70s and 60s there. A high surf advisory is also in effect all day Sunday. Inland Valley, slightly cloudy, a little bit warmer there. Sun up in the mountains, except for Monday. There is a chance of showers and thunderstorms. And if you peek all the way over to the desert, it's going to be hot and a chance of showers and thunderstorms for the beginning of the week. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here again on Monday. Have yourself a great weekend.